Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 298. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have back with us the highly renowned Vermont children's fiction author, J.L. DuRona.
Hello,
And
everybody.
Jesse, you're here to talk about your latest Berge Sisters book, The Ghosts of Warble Hall.
Yes, sir, that's correct. On like almost the eve of your 300th episode, too. That's pretty neat.
I know, see, it's exciting. So I basically I have you on almost seems like every 100, almost every year now, Jesse, you're coming on.
Yeah, well, I mean, the plan is to do a new book every year, at least, if not more. But right now, one a year is pretty much what I got.
You did promise in your last interview that your second book is not going to be as hard to say, and I think you're right. So the Ghosts of Warble Hall is easier to say than Tor the Neathersworth. So that's a
Yeah,
good turn. Yeah.
at the very
Um,
least, the first title's memorable. But yeah, I definitely wanted it to roll off the tongue a little bit better the next go around.
do you want to tell people a little bit about also just what the Berge Sisters series is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do want to clarify that it's not YA, it's middle grade. So it's actually for a
Okay.
slightly younger audience. YA typically is for like 15 and up, depending. I think you'll get different answers depending on who you ask. But I would say that mine is upper middle grade, like for so like 9 to 12-year olds is kind of the range that I'm going for.
Okay.
But
Perfect.
anyway, to answer your question, the Berg Sisters is a series that I started last year with the first book, as you can see here, Berg Sisters Toward the Neathersworth. It's about two stepsisters who the series as a whole is about them getting into all sorts of very like weird and creepy supernatural situations. So like in the first book, they go to their great uncle's creepy old mansion and they accidentally open a portal to another dimension and release a whole bunch of monsters into the house. And they have to figure out how to get rid of them before their dad comes back. Um,
Hmm.
Not only is it, do I like really like to focus on a lot of the fun, like supernatural and kind of quirky, macabre stuff, but there's a lot of family drama there as well because they at first the sisters don't get along because they're stepsisters and there's a kind of a complicated history as to why the parents have married, so it takes them a little while to get used to each other, and throughout the course of the series they bond more and more.
And explain a little bit too for those that might be familiar with it as well. It's just like the world building aspect. What kind of world have you created here?
So it's a little different for each one, the setting at least, but in terms of where it takes place in contemporary times, roughly in like kind of New England. The first one in Vermont, the next one takes place in and or around New York. But for the first book, the Neathersworth is an alternate dimension that is primarily underground and has a lot of like um, moldy, gooey, slimy stuff going on. So there's a lot of like mushroomy things. There's a lot of like gross smelling stuff. There's a tunnel that is at least to the character's eyes, looks like it's made of ground beef, and there's a whole bunch of eyeballs hiding in it. So there's a lot of creepy, fun, but still silly stuff going on. Like a lot of the monsters that live there, a lot of like kind of the underground dwellers, as it were, aren't necessarily bad or good. They're sort of chaotic. So like the little monsters that break into the house, they just trash the place for fun. And they meet a very scary spidery guy later who is actually on the cover there, and he turns out to be pretty friendly. So he ends up ferrying them across the Neathersworth and giving them a tour.
How do you come up with the ideas for your books?
So for the first book, I sort of put together Gremlins and Beetlejuice, sort of the idea of a bunch of little monsters rampaging inside of kind of an isolated home, because the mansion is on top of a hill. It's in the mountains, so they can't really get to anybody for help. And there's a lot of kind of wacky stuff going on. Like there's a passageway into the Nether Swarth through the dryer, and there's like a lot of like catacombs and like slides that lead to places that you wouldn't expect. So it's just a lot of like, you're here 1 second and then you open up a passage and then you're somewhere else entirely. And after a while, the characters are just like, we're just gonna go with it because we have no other choice, basically. But I like to say that it has a very grounded yet very wacky world.
How do you do the research then for a book like this?
So in terms of research, at least for this book, most of the research I ended up doing was for figuring out the names of certain elements of houses. So like turrets and
Okay.
dormers and all that kind of fun stuff like that. This first book, I didn't actually have to do a lot of research for, in terms of anything that I was worried that people would read and go, "Hey, this isn't accurate," because it's in a world where almost anything can happen. But I just like to run off my own secret rules, so that it's kind of like when you do magic in a book. If you can do anything with magic, then it's not fun, right? It's because
Right.
then there's no tension, there's nothing interesting happening. So you sort of have to take the characters on this journey, and as long as you know what the limits are, you can kind of go through that. There was a lot more research for the second book when we get more into that, though. But this first book
Okay.
definitely was like interdimensional travel, pseudoscience, weird monsters, crazy, silly things that don't make sense, bloody blue. So this one was definitely a lot more. I don't want to say fun, but it was a lot more zany than
Right.
Warble Hall ended up being.
How is this book different than your first one?
Ooh boy. So big thing is that instead of a monster story, like a creature feature, as it were, this one is a ghost story. The main
Mm,
characters, Lacey is the character that we're in the head of, so she's our point of view character. When she's not at the mansion in the first book, she lives full time at a boarding school called St. Aggie's. And the story starts when her stepsister Cal comes to stay with her at the school for about a month. She's got their circumstances with their parents make it so that she has to stay with Lacey, and she's kind of like nervous about that because it's like, oh, this is my world that's sort of separate from my family, so it's going to be kind of weird to put those together. But while they're there, they decide to explore an abandoned dorm room, or not dorm room, dorm facility, like dorm in general. And it had a fire back in 1993, and it's been abandoned ever since because they just don't want to repair it. But on the eve of it finally being torn down, they want to go and explore it so that they can take pictures. And lo and behold, turns out it's not as abandoned as everybody thought.
how was the science that you've created? How does Ghost fit within this like Undercroft world that you've created as well in your first book?
Technically, it doesn't. I like to
Okay.
think that I've left it open enough that if I wanted to interchange them somehow, I could. In the first book, there's a section where one of the characters sort of explains that our world is kind of like an old window where, like, there are old panes that are like kind of loose, and every now
Mm,
and then a bit of a breeze will come through, and that's when you get influences from other dimensions, like ghosts maybe, or like Bigfoot, or like all the creatures from the Netherswarth. There are places in the world where kind of the veil is thinner, which is a common idea for interdimensional stuff in fiction anyway. it's sort of open to the idea that maybe the ghosts exist here because the veil is thinner, but I don't specify that. I like to leave it open. Honestly, I kind of right now I'm sort of focusing on the characters having, excuse me, separate adventures that are linked in terms of their personal like character growth, but not in terms
Okay.
of the experiences that they have, because it just gives me a lot more freedom and it's just a lot more fun that way. Not to say that I'm going completely willy-nilly. I'm not going to inadvertently negate stuff that I've worked on before, but or that I've created before, but hopefully that won't be hopefully that won't be too jarring for people not to have a lot of the same elements at play in the next story.
What are some of the obstacles that you had from your first book that you learned from that you were able to utilize writing your second book?
The thing that's been funny is that I'm basically having all of the opposite hurdles this time that I had the first go around. So
Okay.
first go around, the book was fairly easy to write. Edits were pretty slim. It was pretty solid.
Mm,
I had gotten a content editor. I had hired one. I had hired a line editor to kind of make sure like all those little foibles were ironed out and all that good stuff. But outside of a few changes here and there, the story itself wasn't too difficult. This one, on the other hand, had so many false starts and so many directions that it started with. For a while there, I had the entire story through Cal's perspective. I had a giant worm living under Warble Hall. I had all this kind of like weird stuff happening, and not to say that giant worms won't appear later if I feel like it, but no, yeah, just like, and so much just like second guessing my ideas, and like that first act just had so many changes that the actual writing of the book was 10 times more difficult than the first book. But this go around, all of the self-publishing stuff has been a breeze because I already have all the accounts set up. I already have the know-how to assemble the books because I learned the software last year. I knew exactly what I needed in terms of the cover format for my artist, because for an example like this one, what I did was it's not a wraparound. It kind of like it kind of cuts over, and I
mhm.
sort of had to interlap the spine. I don't know if that's even like visible, but
Yep.
for this one, and then I just took that front image and took all the foreground characters out of it, or I had my artist do it, I should say, and
Mm.
then and so that's how I got the front and back cover. But this go around, I did a full on wraparound, so it was a lot easier to lay it out on the template that I'm using.
Is this falling on like a series, or is this kind of like something along the lines of, say, like Nancy Drew, where every book is kind of its own enclosed storyline?
For this next book for Warble Hall, I have the first chapter does kind of wrap up some of the things that could have maybe have been an epilogue for the first book. But what I
Okay.
wanted to do was make it clear enough. So I'm definitely numbering them as one, two, three, however many there end up being. But my goal is that if somebody likes the cover to one of them or likes the idea more than another and reads them out of order, they can still enjoy them, but maybe they just won't have the big picture of the overall development. And
Mm.
if they're so inclined to look at what happened before, maybe they'll pick up the next one, maybe they'll pick up the one before it, or you know, like but yeah, the idea is definitely that if you read them in order, you will get a more enriching character experience, as it were. But that you can pick them up individually if one is interesting to you. You just might you won't feel lost, but you'll feel like there's stuff that you might want to know more about.
Right. So what about the supporting characters in here? Is there any are there any new supporting characters that didn't exist in the first book, or is there any supporting characters from the first book that carry over into the second book?
Yes, so both actually. So there's a character in the first book that Lacey, again the main character, speaks to on video phone when she goes to the mansion, who is her roommate at Warble Hall, and she has not as big of a role, but she's actually in person and in multiple scenes.
Huh.
So she is a character now as well, and then there are several characters that are ghosts within the school that are either supporting characters or antagonists, or like the like kind of minion characters, as it were. But the most important one would be Cece, which is a girl that is a ghost from the early 90s, who's like kind of a like a grunge chick. So she's if she were if she existed in real life, she'd be like one of those kids that was really into like Nirvana with like the flannel and like the torn jeans and all that good kind of stuff. And she becomes their guide as they try to escape the building.
But has your writing process evolved from your first book to your second book?
Absolutely, yes. I again, like this one definitely was a lot more difficult to write than the first. I would say that because of how messy the initial design and like writing was for this book, more than anything, my process will change in the future, because I'm already designing the next book, and I'm planning on being a lot more, well, I already am being a lot more aware of specifically what elements are the most important, what are the things that I really want to say in the story, um, what each character goes through in terms
Hmm.
of their arc, and more than anything, lots and lots of pre-planning. Like
Hmm.
I am not a pantser per se, but I'm now officially a lot less loose when it comes to my process. It used to be that I would think of like I sort of think of it like a movie. So I think of what I want the scene what scenes that I feel like the story needs, and then I'll put them on like a digital sticky note on my computer, and I will then organize them, and I'll use those very basic templates as the idea for the scene. Problem there is that there was just so much that I wanted to tell. There's a lot more. There's honestly a lot more of a personal element with this one, because it focuses on loss and friendship and sort of like a lot of things that are very personal to me. The main character, she is conflicted about um, being close with her new family, because she's worried that her mom, who passed, is like she's worried about betraying that memory, and that's a very big theme throughout the story. And that's something that my mom died many years ago, but it's something that I'm only very recently processing in any real um, practical, like in any real like tangible way. So it was a bit of an emotional journey going on this, like working on this book, way more than the first.
Hmm.
So I think kind of putting those two elements together, the personal and the practical, is what's going to help me in the future. Having said that, I've been rereading it for the final for like the final draft before I export it into like the ebook formats, and not to toot my own horn, but I'm really proud of this one. I think it's going to be great.
So Did you, so in that way, did you write this book for you, or did you write this for but who's the audience for this?
So that's a really good question. I think that the on the surface level, right? The audience for this story is for the age range that I said before, like nine to 12 roughly, depending on reading level, of course.
Right.
But I the like personal messages, I don't like hammer them in.
Mm.
So someone could someone might feel more strongly about certain elements than others in the like somebody a kid who has not lost a parent would certainly, maybe they'll enjoy the ghosts more, or maybe they'll relate to one of the characters specifically. But both of these stories started with the concept first, like creepy interdimensional mansion, the creepy, spooky, haunted res hall, and the personal elements kind of came in as I was working on it. And I w- I'm a firm believer that even if you don't know it or not, like whether or not you know it, you are putting yourself into your work no matter what you're doing. So even if it's very even if it feels very surface level, you are putting yourself in there. But I I think that this latest book is for anybody that has just ever felt like they have a lot of emotion that they don't know how to process. My main
Mm.
character is Lacey is very she's very hot-headed, she's very stubborn, but she's also very guarded. It's very hard for her to process the feelings that she has about the loss of her mom, about the fact that her dad has remarried, about the fact that she feels very strongly for her stepsister now. It's I think it's for yeah, I really think it's for anybody who has ever felt like they have emotions inside them that they just can't that they can't put to words or can't put out there. And you know, also anyone who likes ghosts, right?
Was there any particular scene that you recall that was difficult to write, either from just a dialogue piece, or just from a thematic piece?
100%. Near, I don't want to spoil it too much. I mean, I feel like most people reading this are going to be reading it for they like screening it so that they'd be like, okay, maybe I will get this for my kids. So cool. But yeah, near the third act, there's a set of circumstances where Lacey witnesses the past, and she witnesses her mother at her age during a very pivotal moment.
Mm,
And that scene was just very is just ended up being very raw and very emotional, because throughout the journey, the biggest thing is that Lacey realizes that her mother was actually like a real normal person at one point. Like,
mm,
she's always seen her. It's like the main theme of the story for Ghosts of Warble Hall is that Lacey has always seen her mother as this like angelic pedestal figure that just can do no wrong and was just so amazing. You know how we always honor the dead in such a way, right? But she learns throughout the story that like yeah, her mom was actually a person that had flaws, and that was okay. And yeah, processing that in for myself personally, it was kind of like doing it myself. I don't 100% agree with this, but I've often heard that art is free therapy, and I'm a very strong believer that you should also get real therapy. But it's definitely can be very cathartic.
with that said, when is the book coming out?
The Ghosts of Warble Hall is coming out September 26th. It will be
Wow.
available in paperback and ebook. I am potentially working on a Barnes & Noble exclusive edition paperback, but I haven't quite figured that out yet, but that will be very interesting. And I'm actually doing a book signing at the new Barnes & Noble in West Lebanon, New Hampshire on October 14th between 1 and 3. So I will have
Nice.
both, yeah, I will have both books there, and you can come say hi, and I will have a free sticker for anyone who comes and says hello, which will be fun. And incidentally, right on like kind of the right on the cusp of the new book coming out, I'm doing a sale on the first book, at least the ebook version. Normally it's $4.99. Right now it's only 99 cents until the 28th.
Do you kind of have an idea of what your third book's going to be about?
I do, yes. I have already started outlining it. While I was, you see, it's funny how creativity works, because I was feeling so burnt and so like dry and like crusty, and like that I would be blown away with the wind after finishing the book and handing it over to my line editor. But in the 2 weeks that I had no influence on that book whatsoever, it freed my mind to work on the next one. So I do have the next one in mind. I already have the entire outline done, and I'm breaking it down chapter by chapter right now.
Is there a theme with it too? Is there going to be a different type of kind of like monster of the week kind of situation going on with that one too?
This one is vampire themed.
Okay, all right, fun. All right,
Yep.
excellent.
It's
All right.
I'm building it as more of a mystery, and this one is actually going to be even more interesting because I'm doing for the first time, I'm doing a dual POV. Both Lacey and Cal have chapters of
Oh,
their
cool.
like kind of inner selves, because they have sort of, they're in the same place, but they have like a split adventure, as it were. Like it's from different angles, because they're both kind of doing different things. But they're investigating their weird neighbors, because they think that they're hiding something, and they suspect that they might be blood-sucking creatures of the night.
So Jesse, if people want to learn more about your work, where's the best place they could go to?
Best place to go would be to go to my website, which I super smartly put on the screen there. So it's the jldurona.com. That
Okay.
gets you to, if you want to email me, you can do it from there. It also, you can also sign up for my newsletter. And if you do that, then you actually get a free ebook, which is a prequel story that takes place before the first book with the characters.
Oh, fun. Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jesse. It was great talking to you again.
Hey, you too, Barney. Thank you.